Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. We're back with another series, and before we get started, I'm extremely excited to share that the Authority File is now an award-winning podcast. That's right, we were named Best B2B Podcast at the 2023 Publisher Podcast Awards. We'll link to it in the show notes for this episode, and you can also check it out at publisherpodcastawards.com. Many thanks to Media Voices, the producer of the event, for the recognition, and of course to the amazing team here at Choice. In this 4-part series, which is brought to you with support from Sage, I'll be speaking with 4 guests on what seems to be an ever-evolving goal: student success in higher education. We examine the scaffolding that supports it, including how that has changed over the years, the library's role in driving student success, how to partner up across the institution, and finally, we'll look ahead at how we might see the concept evolve even further. Joining me on the program are Ceceilia Parnther, Assistant Professor of Higher Education Leadership and Coordinator of Doctoral Programs at St. John's University; María Evelia Emerson, Student Success Librarian at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign; Eakin, Instructional Librarian at Strayer University; and Andrew Boney, Executive Editor at Sage. In this second episode, we look at the library's role in supporting student success. All right, so let's start talking about drilling down to the library's role here a little bit more. So if student success can mean different things to different people, how does a library define its role in that process? What are the fundamentals of that role, and what some of the more malleable elements that adjust to environmental factors? And Amber, I'll jump over to you for that.
Library workers are critical in helping students to build their self-efficacy for information literacy, those skills needed to locate, evaluate, and use content from a variety of sources. So we want to develop discerning consumers of information, as Andrew noted. Yeah, we want students to come to our events. We want them to use our databases or our spaces. We want them to reach out to us, contact us for support. But ultimately, all of those are methods to deliver on this mission of developing their information literacy skills.
Maria?
Yeah, I think obviously one of the strengths that libraries have is connecting their users with what they need, right? So that includes students, but also helping them develop those critical thinking skills is essential. So oftentimes we do get students saying like, "Oh, I need a peer-reviewed article or something like that," and it's like, well, we could just give you that article, but we also want you to learn how to do things. So we're going to help you walk through those steps. So I think it's not as simple as just connecting the user with what they need. It's also like, let's help you develop those skills so you can use those later on in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same goes with, going back to the whole success can mean different things for different people is then connecting students with like, well, what is it exactly that you want in your life at this moment, at least? And also knowing that very likely will change later on. And that, again, going back to like, we need to offer a variety of different resources, a variety of different workshops, a variety of different services to help expose them to as many different things as possible. Because I really think these moments in your life where you just like realize something, it happens so organically. And you're not really going to come across those moments if you're not exposed to as many different things as possible. So I think the library's role with student success really ties back into that. Like, how do we offer students different things?
Mm-hmm. Amber, we'll jump back to you for a sec.
I wanted to comment on something that Maria had mentioned and how students might be looking for certain types of content.
Yep.
Maria mentioned peer review, and I think we hear that a lot in the library. I need peer-reviewed content. That's not always the most appropriate type of content. So part of our job is helping them to understand what types of content are appropriate for their information need. If they're looking for current events, they might go to newspapers or magazines. If they are trying to learn all about a topic, they might use ebooks. They might prefer visual content. So I think it's really important that we're helping them to understand that there are different types of credible and valuable sources outside of what we often hear, which is peer review.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, absolutely. I love having these conversations with students because I think it can really help form that student identity. Um, and having them learn that they also can be experts in things, because a lot of times we talk about what's an expert, and it's often someone, with an academic background in something. I love to talk about how, well, experts can also be someone with lived experience in something, and having those voices in that conversation, especially with research, is crucial. So having them think about, well, what else can we include in this conversation? What can you bring to this conversation? Because they might have experience with something that they're researching, is great. So Amber, I absolutely agree with you. We talk about peer review all the time, but how can we change that conversation a little bit to show that each voice is valuable?
Mm. Andrew, what are you making of this?
Well, I think one of the things that this speaks to that's really exciting is the openness of librarians to think broadly about what constitutes a library resource and library services. Um, and I'm seeing from my publisher perspective an incredible amount of diversification in what libraries are offering in terms of, for example, digital resources like
Mm-hmm.
online courses, professional skill resources, like LinkedIn Learning. And I think it really shows the library as flexible, proactive, and an integral campus partner that I think gives them the opportunity to create really interesting relationships across campus with other organizations that may not have traditionally seen the library as the source of those services or resources. And I think it's really exciting to see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Great. Um, that segues perfectly into my next question. And student success is clearly a campus-wide initiative, and so I'm curious to see how a library might establish itself in that mix. How does it kind of reach out to folks who might not view the library as a particular opportunity in sort of a learning situation, and how does it carve out its niche among campus stakeholders? And Cecilia, I'll jump over to you to start that one off.
There's a lot of untapped opportunity
Mhm.
in my opinion, both in understanding how expansive library resources are and then also in what those partnerships can look like. Um, as a faculty member, I myself am guilty of I'm going to have you come in at the beginning of the semester. We're going to, introduce you to that reference resource page, and you'll become familiar with ProQuest. And yay, I've done my due diligence here. But you know, in becoming better, I have learned just the importance and really right now the urgency of having those cross campus collaborations for a couple of reasons. The first is, again, coming back to technology.
Mm,
What will set our students apart is their ability to locate, discern, and make informed opinions about the information that they're consuming. And the experts who can help us with, cultivating those skills that they need to navigate any discipline are within the library. And so, what big picture strategic conversations can we have to make sure that those folks and those resources are really at the center of conversations that we have when we think about how we are integrating AI, how we're integrating specifically research tools and machine learning into our respective disciplines and creating policies and procedures around that. I think that we can learn a lot from the library and need to very proactively be having those conversations as we think about what to invest in and then where to place our supports.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I would just offer is increasing our students' knowledge. I think many folks who work in colleges and in post-secondary institutions have had a bit of social capital and have been able to navigate these systems, however imperfect. And sometimes it's easy to forget that we don't know a student's relationship to a library and to accessing these resources. And so it can feel very daunting. In addition to not knowing the expansiveness of the resources, they may not feel that it is a place where they feel welcome, online or otherwise, in terms of how to navigate. So sometimes I think that stepping back and removing some of the assumptions that we hold about our experiences with research and with librarianship is really important to better understand what a student needs and then how these resources fit into meeting their goals.
Mm. Excellent. Thank you. Amber, I'm curious for your perspective on this.
Well, I know my experience is a little unique in that
Right.
we have campuses across the country and most of our courses are online.
Mm-hmm.
This means that I'm not bumping into people on campus and they're not passing by my events. But the advantage is that I can get leaders and stakeholders into a virtual conference to share information and how they can capitalize on what we in the library do best, which, as Maria said, is connecting students with resources to meet the students' information needs. I go to a lot of meetings and I speak up a lot because people are often surprised by what we have that can fit their needs. There might be a faculty member who has been looking for case studies to share with their students, and they don't realize that we have tons of those that we can share. Or there might be faculty members who have said, wow, it would be really great if we could have an example of a SWOT analysis for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I can say, oh, well, in this database, here is an actual publication type. So you can find tons and tons of these. So whenever I hear that there's a need that we might be able to fill, I speak up so
Mm-hmm.
that they start to get more familiar with it. And it keeps the library relevant and in the room, so to
Mm.
speak.
Right. And Maria, what's your experience there?
Yeah, I think showing that libraries are versatile is incredibly important.
Mm.
I think a lot of times we do have this mindset that, we are a building full of books, and that is true. But also so much more than books. And that can be a little bit of a controversial statement, I know. And this is, I mean, obviously I love books. Books are really important. But libraries are often the spot on campus where you don't have to be in a specific degree in order to be in that building. We're open later than other buildings. We're open on the weekend. And students go there to, hang out with their friends and to use the spaces in lots of different ways. So I think, creating those partnerships is really crucial to show, like we can do a lot. We can do more than what people probably expect of us. Going back to something that Cecilia said with library anxiety with students, I'm so glad
Yeah.
you said that. That's such a real thing. So one of the things that's really important, I think, for student success is looking at who's in the library and what are the needs that they have, but it's just as important to look at who's not in the library. And that means going outside the library to different areas on campus and seeing, where are other students that we might not be seeing in the library and why is that? And that's
Mm.
not to say that everyone should be in the library. We might not be the place for everyone. As long as it's for a good reason. They might just have found a spot that they like to study in more. But if it's because they had a bad experience or they're overwhelmed or they feel like they don't belong there, that's something we do need to be concerned about. So looking outside of our building and who's using our resources and looking to see who's not
Mm.
is important.
Excellent. Okay. So then, in terms of library staffing, how does a library delegate roles and responsibilities among staff? How should it allow room for people like yourselves to define what success looks like and continue to assess and measure specific initiatives? Maria, I'll stick with you on that.
Yeah, I think looking at everyone's different strengths is really important. And also, this goes back to the lived experiences again. A librarian who was a first generation student is going to connect with a student who's first generation better than someone who's not. And they're also going to be bringing these perspectives in that others might not have. And that goes with a lot of other different experiences. So I like having lots of different perspectives, and I like having lots of different opinions when designing projects or services to keep that in mind, because I have blind spots in my life. So that's important to keep in mind with that. I think also, even though they're not, well, they can be part of the staff, we have student workers, but getting that student voice included is so crucial for this, because they know better than anyone else what their struggles are and what they need from us. And I think sometimes students might feel like they're talking to a brick wall, because they will say, I'm struggling with this, and then nothing happens. So when you have that input coming from students, it's really, really important to then do something about that, to show them that you're listening and that you hear them, and that you have them in mind when you're designing certain things. So I definitely think look at the different strengths of the staff that you're working with, look at the different lived experiences, but also tap into the students is really important.
Right. Amber, again, with the way your institution is set up, I mean, how does that work in your dynamic?
We cross-train so that
Mm.
most of us can perform different common tasks like reference and group instruction. I use a bookings calendar to help allocate the instruction sessions so that we don't have one person on the team ending up with 7 instruction sessions in a week and someone else has 1. So trying to evenly distribute that. I'm also a huge fan of data analytics. So I keep track of a variety of metrics like attendance, when did we have the session, who did we work with, so that we can assess and evaluate whatever our initiatives may be. Then, as a team, we'll come together to review those regularly to see if we need to make a change or potentially discontinue a project if it isn't supporting students in the way that we had hoped. It's sort of like taking an action research approach to our work.
Excellent. And then Cecilia, I'm curious, for your perspective on this, are there things, that you see that work really well in terms of that, or maybe some wishes? Do you have a wish list?
I trust and defer to my
Okay.
colleagues in the space on that one. I think there were just some great things that were shared.
Excellent. You just heard from Ceceilia Parnther, Assistant Professor of Higher Education Leadership and Coordinator of Doctoral Programs at St. John's University, María Evelia Emerson, Student Success Librarian at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Amber Eakin, Instructional Librarian at Strayer University, and Andrew Boney, Executive Editor at Sage. This series is brought to you with support from Sage. Join us next week as we examine the importance of partnering for student success, including who the key stakeholders are, tactical approaches to engaging in partnerships, and the importance of follow-through. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.